thank you for all that have come in, and whether it's to come here, Melinda and I speak about this topic, or just to come get a seat because your feet are tired from walking around Modex. We appreciate the next 45 minutes. We'll try to keep it a little short of that, give you some time back. We got some Q&A at the end, but again, thanks for coming in listen to us on our topic. It's elevating operations with total intralogistics solutions, an ecosystem of efficiencies. We'll talk a little bit about what that means. Real quick introduction, my name is Justin Benson. I am the Vice President of Intralogistics Solutions at Carolina Handling. For those that aren't as familiar with us, we are a Raymond Solutions and Support Center located in the Southeast, covering primarily the Carolinas, Georgia, and Alabama. And I'm responsible for our entire integration and automation group. I've been in this business now for about 8 years. Prior to being the vice president role that I'm in now, I was our director of sales and a sales leadership role before that. I was just telling Melinda, oddly enough, I started in this industry close to 30 years ago. I just realized it's my first job when I was 14 years old, yes, 14, in North Carolina. I think because my parents either hated me or wanted to instill some discipline in me for some reason, was to install pallet racking in a textiles warehouse in North Carolina in the middle of the summer. So got a quick introduction into what the industry of material handling looks like, and then many years later jumped back into it full time. So I did tell Melinda, oddly enough, my mom was the OSHA compliance officer of that company. So I had to remind her that that was probably illegal for her to put a 14-year-old into a rack system. So, but to hand it over to the real star of the show, Melinda.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melinda Lockey. I am the Director of Intralogistics Solutions at the Raymond Corporation. Been with Raymond for 11 years. Prior to that, I was a nerdy engineer working for a lot of consulting firms, doing supply chain consulting and software integration, but been very happy to be with Raymond for the past 11 years. As Director of Intralogistics Solutions, I'm responsible for helping our network, our enterprise, grow in the system space. So things that are a little bit not as traditional in the Raymond space, but the conveyors, the racking, robotics, and that kind of thing. So we really do appreciate your time today, and hopefully you'll leave with some more information about our ecosystem. So we talk about the complexity in distribution. It's quite substantial. I'm sure everybody in here has experienced this. The complexity continues to grow. Just thinking about the labor pool, 60% of the job positions in distribution require skill sets that only 20% of the labor force possesses. I would also submit to you that the rate of change that we're experiencing today is probably the slowest rate of change that we're going to experience going forward. So every day we have operations managers coming to us and asking what kind of solutions are out there to help reduce the complexity and maybe make our operations a little bit more efficient. So we thought that maybe we could have a little bit of your time today to talk about some of the things that we found that can help ease in some of that complexity. Things like the technology and the data that's derived from technologies out there. What are some of the data points that lead to decisions with equipment that you have in place, or decisions that you may make for equipment purchases in the future? And then even aftermarket, how does that come into play? How does the aftermarket and keeping everything maintained reduce the complexity in the long run as well?
You know, Melinda, you talk about labor constraints. It's a hot topic today, right? A lot of conversations I've had just here on the show floor over the last couple of days have been with customers or folks that are interested in inputting automation into their facilities solely to supplement the labor loss or shortages that they face. You know, there's statistics abound that tell us that is a trend that is not going to change. It's going to stay with us for the foreseeable future, right? As the baby boomer generation continues to retire and the younger generation is not entering the workforce at the same rate. You can look at statistics all over that tell us that we're going to continue to see more job openings than there are job seekers. And that obviously is a major issue as we look at consumer demands continue to increase at the rate that they are. So it's a really, I think, something that for the last few years maybe hasn't come quite to the surface in the way that we've seen it here recently, with a lot of our customers at least looking at how do we overcome those challenges.
Right. And even with the automation technologies that are out there, there's a lot of shiny new toys out here on the floor that I'm sure you've seen. And sometimes that does alleviate some of that complexity, but it also can be a real difficult and impactful solution to bring into your operations. And so we find that if we look at the operation as a whole and try to figure out where we're at today, our current state, and what our future state's going to be, that helps with those decisions.
So it's time to take out your textbooks. We're going to have 8th grade biology class. Completely kidding, obviously. But we do want to talk about ecosystems. You know, it's a word that's coming into play again more and more often as we think about the totality of the environments, the operations, whether it's manufacturing, distribution, e-com, it doesn't matter what it is. Like, there's an ecosystem that exists there. You know, you look at how the Oxford Dictionary defines it, right? A biological community of interacting organisms in their physical environment. Well, I think you can all look at me and say, this guy's a moron. Why is he talking about science? It has nothing to do with material handling. But the second definition I think actually applies. So a complex network or interconnected system. So when you think about ecosystems, you look around, I mean, gosh, we live in one, right? I mean, again, not a science teacher. I gave that up a long time ago, but you know, the Earth itself is an ecosystem. There's really a few main pillars, functioning items that are interconnected within Earth's ecosystem, right? Land, air, water, and then, of course, all of the elements that feed within that. But those all work in conjunction with each other to give us the, you know, the world that we get to live in today. The same thing really goes for intralogistics operations, right? In the material handling world, it's all a unique ecosystem. And typically we see there's a few, I'll use the term pillars, or main ingredients, if you will, that are mixed together that bring that all into one house. And if one is thrown off a little bit, it may cause impacts to the other. So as we think about complexity, what that looks like, as you add more and more complex solutions into that ecosystem, it can have both positive and negative effects in certain cases that we all just have to be aware of as we're putting plans around our operations.
Absolutely.
So to carry on as we talk about the interconnected automation, right? I mean, again, Melinda mentioned it. If you haven't walked through the show, which I'm sure most of you have at this point, there is a lot of toys, as my colleague would call them, toys. A lot of shiny objects out there, some that are extremely applicable to the right situations and some that may not be applicable to those situations. But a lot of really interesting stuff. The world that we are operating in, material handling, is really driving towards automation. Again, to reference back what we spoke about a minute ago, which is relative to labor shortages, obviously speed of delivery, consumer expectations, throughput requirements, all of those elements are key components. So things that are impacting the operation when we start to interconnect automation, you see it up here, right? It's increasing the complexity, as we've talked about. The question we ask ourselves is, how is it going to impact our operation? You know, if you go to introduce automation maybe upstream in a process, what's it going to do to the downstream? How is it going to impact that? If you put automation in the downstream, is the upstream ready to feed it the way it needs to be so that it is fluid and meets the requirements that you're looking for within that facility? And then it goes without saying, I think anyone that talks or looks at automation understands that don't ever automate a bad process, because what do we get, right? We get a bad automated process. So there's really no reason to do that. Take the time to evaluate if you have done all the things leading up to it before you introduce automation. And then lastly is, we like to tell our folks a lot, Melinda, when we're talking to customers, you know, focus on tactical approach, not a broad brush, right? You can't come in and just shove one big ball of automation into a facility, into an operation. It may not be capable of receiving it. It may not be ready to swallow that entire ball of automation. So let's break it down and think about it in a more tactical manner so that we can be precise in how we do that. Because sometimes it may not even require automation. Sometimes maybe it's just an adjustment to how you're looking at the process through lean management, or utilizing some of your data solutions or other resources that are at your disposal.
Absolutely. And we talk to a lot of customers about automated solutions, and some things that customers are not expecting in that conversation are considerations about that labor and how that automation is going to impact the operation quite substantially. I'll give you a quick example. We talk to customers about putting in automated reach trucks into aisles, and if you're familiar with the warehouse management system, the way it operates is those every location within a facility has an XYZ coordinate attached to it within that WMS. And so when we automate forklifts, we have to consider the integration of that WMS and what the WMS is going to send to that equipment. In the case of putting a pallet away in a location, for example, it's going to look for that same XYZ coordinate that it's being sent from the WMS. So what happens is if we introduce an automated reach truck, for example, we have to make sure that that is going to be a pure automated area. If you have manual putaways going into that area, that operator is very likely to put away those pallets in a place that is off of the XYZ coordinate that automated reach truck is looking for. So it's something that a lot of our customers say, I never would have thought of that, right? So if I introduce an automated reach truck, what am I going to do with the rest of the labor force that was in that area? How do I repurpose them into doing other functions? And also, what kind of equipment am I going to need now? What kind of changes to the process to accommodate for that introduction of automation? So there's a lot of things that have to be considered when you're talking about the interconnectivity, even outside of the software solutions. It's also about the labor impact as well.
Yeah, I think, to go back a step here, we talk about the complexity. If you have an entirely manual facility, right, manual process-driven facility, you can get really complex really quickly. And it may be kind of, as some would call it, getting over your skis a little bit too far, right? So being able to slow that pace and do it in a very controlled manner, because, to your example there, Melinda, all of a sudden if we introduce something and the facility, the folks in the facility, right, those leaders, the managers, don't understand how they need to incorporate, whether it's the software with the WMS, understanding operator training, right? Teaching those manual operators how to not go into safety zones or not go into zones that are going to interface with a automated truck. So there's a lot of things to consider there that I think we have to call into question.
Absolutely.
So continuing on, we talked about earlier, we were just giving the example of an ecosystem, right? Land, water, air that involves earth. This is just a simple example of really probably a common type of theme you would see in most operations today, where there are really 4 key elements. Now there can be a lot more than this, again, as the operation is more complex, but this is what we look at. So the main elements here, technology. So how do we define technology, right? Could be a telematics solution, labor management. Maybe it is a WMS, advanced picking technologies, et cetera, all fall into the technology that you're going to see in a more complex environment or ecosystem. The other is the data, right? That technology, what is it doing? It's giving us the ability to see data in a different way. How do we use that data? Data's gold. We're mining gold with that technology. So we're able to take the technology, provide the data that we can then compile and evaluate to use it to make sound decisions about what we're going to do within the operation. And maybe it's relative to the equipment, which is the next bullet, right? And equipment in a facility could be a lot of different things. For any of our forklift folks in here, right? It could be your MHE or pit equipment. It could be defining your fleet mix, understanding your utilization, and that maybe you're using a piece of equipment that's more related to vertical put away, that you're using it more for horizontal transport. So there's a better way to do that. And that may not be introducing automation, but it may just be able to simplify some things that allow you a better vision to how to introduce a more complex environment. So equipment beyond that, we deal with a lot in the space that I'm in, and my team, conveyance, right? It could be automated storage and retrieval systems, AGVs, AMRs, which if you walk the show, you'll see about 400 of them out there. All kidding aside, there's a lot of representation for that product line, but a lot of different things there that fall into the equipment side. I think what's most important is, as we use technology to allow us to understand data better, to make those sound, informed decisions about the equipment to improve the operation, we then don't give up. We then make sure that we understand the aftermarket support environment. And what does aftermarket mean? Parts availability, product support, service partnership, whether it's internal staff, maintenance staff that's maintaining the equipment that the company has just spent capital investment on, right? Ton of time and energy to go and invest into putting an automated solution into place or putting a fleet or a new process in. Let's make sure we can maintain it to understand what that the life cycle is going to look like, right? We all buy a new car. You don't just drive it till the wheels fall off. You go every 5,000 miles or so and get an oil change, you get your tires rotated. The same thing when you're going to go invest in any type of equipment that's running in your operation. So really this is a continuous flow, the way we typically see it, right? You're using technology to allow you to understand your data that allows you to make informed decisions about the equipment, the type of equipment, and how your processes work. And then from there, making sure that you sustain that investment. And then that's kind of it's a continuous flow. Once one is kind of complete, the other one comes around. And from time to time, we introduce other things in here that will bounce back and forth off of those. But that's really when we talk about the interconnected system.
Absolutely. And just staying on that same topic of aftermarket, we're finding that a lot of our customers, they are putting in conveyors, and they're finding that while that's all well and good, they weren't quite prepared for the maintenance that's going to take place, and understanding what data points they need in order to determine what kind of conveyance they need, how are they going to maintain that, what kind of parts do they need. We're finding that there's a lot of new software technologies that are coming out too, and I'm sure they're out here, that are giving some of that visibility to the operation, because aftermarket, quite frankly, tends to be a little bit forgotten part of the operation. But it's so critical to maintaining, because as you all well know, when you make any changes to software, you introduce any kind of automation, you're putting a lot of money into that. And if it's something that's not going to be able to be maintained, it's going to be a very expensive experiment otherwise. Just
out of curiosity, is anyone in the room that works with the supporting of equipment in a facility, whether it's as a consultant, as a service partner, or as someone that's overseeing that in the operation? Is there anybody in here that deals with that? All right.
See, it's forgotten.
It's forgotten, that's right.
That's right.
Taken.
That's right. I'll give you another example. I tend to like simple graphs. This one's pretty simple. This represents about a year's worth of a pilot that we were doing with a customer of ours, talking to them about telematics. And when we approached them about this opportunity, customer said, thank you very much, Melinda, but we have a labor management system in place, and it's pretty robust. We can see that our associates are 100% utilized and 100% productive each and every day. So we don't need any kind of telematics to tell us what's going on with the equipment. We offered to pilot this for a few months, like I said, and we decided to put the telematics solutions on the forklifts on the inbound side of the operation. So typically, it's just an operator going into a trailer, picking up a pallet, putting it on the dock, going back in the trailer, picking up a pallet, putting it on the dock, and that's what they were doing all day long. We were really surprised to find what the results of that experiment, of that pilot, look like. So the blue line on the top represents the log-in hours. That's how long those operators were logged into that system, into that forklift, okay? The red are the activity hours. That's how often that forklift was driving in and out of the trailers, or raising, lowering, doing any kind of vertical or horizontal movement, okay? And we come to find out that the forklift utilization for that function was only at 36%. And the manager said, how is that possible? We know that in our labor management system, it's 100%, the associates are 100% utilized and 100% productive. Well, come to find out that they were also having to go into the office to get paperwork, or they were wrapping pallets, or they had to go out and make sure that the tires were chalked on the trailer, ... So they were doing supportive tasks, and they were doing what they were expected to do for their job description, but it was taking away the utilization from their equipment. So going back to a previous slide and showing the interconnectivity between the technology, the data that's derived from that technology, and the equipment, we were able to show them that there is an opportunity to change your process, maybe add some people to do those supportive roles, and then you keep your equipment moving, and you can actually reduce the amount of forklifts that you're using out there on the dock floor. That's what happened. So it was the visibility of that allowed them to make those changes. So we find that with that interconnectivity, that we're able to bring some new visibility to the operation, and that's really what a lot of customers are looking for, that opportunity to make informed decisions, and this was a good example of that.
Yeah, I'm an old sports guy at heart, so I use, analogies like if you can't see it, you can't hit it. It's kind of like my golf game or, baseball growing up, right? If you can't see the ball, you're not going to hit it. And I think what this does is gives us the ability to have that increased visibility.
Absolutely.
Right? Lets us go hit a target and create improvement in the facility. I think that's an incredibly important thing. And today, as we see all this automation through Modex and through our industry, there's a lot of software, I'll call it overlay, that occurs. And that can create a very unique environment, right? If you've got an AGV system, for instance, that has its own controls software that needs to talk to another controls environment that then is getting information fed from a WMS. There's a lot of tie-ins there that have to be extremely fluid. And that is, again, that complex environment that we're seeing more and more of today. And the visibility to the data, I think, is the key component, the secret sauce, as they say, to showing success and putting that into a facility.
Absolutely.
So, to kind of round out a little bit here, right, take a step back, to keep on my teacher comments here, do your homework. When you leave biology class today, go do your homework. Understand what an ecosystem looks like in your facility. I think that's the first thing. Step back, look at it at a 30,000 foot view, and then dive in. I think we run into this quite a bit where you've got a segment of a business that maybe is solely focused on improving their operation, but is not really understanding how it feeds within the vision of the entire organization, that entire operation. So take time to do your homework, understand the types of partners you're going to have, right? What types of products look like there's something that you want to put into place, investigate it. Make sure that you can have the product support, whether it's aftermarket or on-call during implementation phases. Those are very key elements to making sure that you find good, sound partners to work with. Because again, there's a lot of great representation out here this week with new emerging technologies. Just taking the time to evaluate those and understand if those really fit the needs of what you're trying to accomplish. So it starts there, and then while you're doing that, look for complementary solutions. A great example is this. We just ran into a project here recently where a customer had a very manual environment, hand picking, walking, a lot of wasted time. And the idea there is they knew that they could not swallow a fully complicated advanced automated solution. So we introduced some AMRs with a very simple conveyor system to allow them to move product through the facility more, free up their operators, free up their pickers to go do other tasks, which now allows them the ability to go scale and increase their business. So we gave them about a 40 to 50% throughput improvement, which now gives them the ability to go make informed decisions about how they want to direct the organization moving forward. So making sure that you've got solutions that complement each other, that work in concert, that are fluid. That is a very key component to, I think, as you increase complexity, making sure it doesn't become overcomplicated.
Right. And that really dovetails into considering the ongoing need to maintain those solutions, because if they're not complementary, it's going to be a bear to maintain those. I've seen it firsthand with some software solutions that don't talk to each other after they've expired their end of life. Usually in a WMS, for example, you'll have a 5-year end of life cycle in which you have to make the decision on whether or not you're going to upgrade to the next version of that software, if you're going to replace it, or if you're just going to keep chugging along and use the same solution. A lot of those systems don't have automated capabilities going forward. So that is a huge consideration, to be able to have complementary solutions, and also how am I going to maintain that? Just having the engineers or IT staff available to be able to maintain that would be important.
Yeah, software is a fickle thing, right?
Yes.
You give a version upgrade. Sometimes it works like they want it to. Sometimes it maybe doesn't quite work like they want it to. So having the ability to be flexible and adjust, and that's part of that ongoing maintenance, right? It's that lifeline to survival, if you will, if something goes wrong.
Absolutely. And then even finding the agile solutions that are adaptable, because the technology will change. You can see it. I mean, they probably had updates since we started this conversation today out here with the software out on the floor. It's pretty impressive how fast things are changing. But with the cost associated with implementing those software solutions, making sure that they're agile and they're adaptable to not only the current solutions you have in place, but also the ones that you might introduce to the operation at a future date.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, we'll open up for any questions or comments, anything that you see out there that
If not, we give you a lot of time back in your day, or you can sit in here for a few more minutes and enjoy time off your feet.
Yeah, exactly.
But, if there are no questions or comments, or if there are and you want to catch Melinda and I think we have our contact information. Feel free to reach out to either one of us, again, with any questions, comments you may have. If it's just curiosity around what we're seeing from our side of things, right? I work a little bit more on the systems integration side, so get to see some different products and solutions that are being implemented out there, whether it's by our team or by others. If you ever have questions about it, reach out to us. Melinda, again, very tied into what the Raymond Corporation's doing in terms of products and driving systems into our markets there as well. So
excellent. Or please stop by our Raymond booth.
Yeah.
5406.
There you go, 54. If you come in B, you can't miss it. It's right there in the middle.
Right in the front.
Thank you all for coming in today. We really appreciate it. I know this is a topic that probably most of you think about on a regular basis, but we hope we give you a few takeaways just as you go back to your operations to evaluate it a little bit differently, making sure that you're hitting on some of the aspects we talked about as we get into this more complex ecosystem that we're in today.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you very much.